My parents sold the family store to give my brother $120,000 for a doomed business, then tried to run my company. Now they're broken barred. Hey Reddit, I run a company with over 100 employees, so my life is basically a constant rotation of problems to solve, deadlines to hit, and fires to put out. I'm used to handling issues that could cost millions if they go wrong, and I've learned to keep calm when everything feels like it's falling apart. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the mess that came from my own family. It started small, the kind of thing you almost brush off, but it snowballed so fast I had no choice but to shut it down hard. I, Josh, 38 male, run a logistics company with a little over 150 employees. We handle supply chain management, warehousing, and distribution for a mix of manufacturers, retailers, and e-commerce businesses. When I started, it was just me, a rented office the size of a storage closet, a desk that wobbled when I leaned on it, and a phone that rang way less than I wanted. I didn't have investors, I didn't have family backing me, and I definitely didn't have a partner taking on half the load. It was me grinding through endless calls, learning the hard way how contracts actually work, and fixing my own mistakes while trying to keep the lights on. Now, we've got multiple warehouses, experienced staff who know their jobs inside out, and clients who trust us with millions in inventory. I sign paychecks for over 150 people every 2 weeks, and that's not something I take lightly. One screw up from me could ripple through the company and hit everyone's livelihoods. I've worked too hard to get here to let anyone mess with that. Then there's my younger brother, Jimmy, 34 male. Jimmy is 3 years younger, but you'd think from how my parents talk about him that he's still a kid who just needs a little more guidance before he figures life out. He's the classic idea guy. Always has a new business plan that sounds amazing when he explains it over dinner, but somehow falls apart the moment he actually tries to run it. Over the years, he's tried everything: a clothing brand, a coffee cart, a marketing agency, a home decor store, even a luxury lifestyle consulting business that was basically him telling people how to spend money he didn't have. None of them lasted more than a few months. And every single time, when it crashed, my parents were right there saying, "It's not his fault, it just wasn't the right time." Or, "He learned so much from this, the next one will take off." Our parents own a small store, the kind of place that's been part of the neighborhood forever. It's not glamorous, but it's been steady. That store has been their safety net for decades. It's how they've paid bills, built their savings, and kept themselves from having to worry too much about retirement. And yeah, sometimes it's also been the ATM for Jimmy's latest can't-fail venture. Now here's where things get unbalanced. My parents have always treated Jimmy like he's a star just waiting for his big break, while I'm the self-sufficient one who doesn't need help. My mom's favorite line, I've heard it since I was a kid, is, "He's the younger child, you're his rock." And when she says rock, she doesn't mean be a good example. She means catch him when he falls, help him whenever he needs it, and don't complain about it because you're the older brother and you can handle it. When I started my company, no one offered me a dime. My dad actually told me I should stick with something stable, like an office job with benefits, because he thought logistics was too risky. But when Jimmy decided to open a smoothie shop in a location that barely had foot traffic, my parents dipped into their savings without hesitation. The place closed in 3 months, and the explanation was, well, the area just wasn't ready for something like that. The thing is, I've had my own failures. In the early days of my business, I lost a big contract because I couldn't meet the shipping deadlines. I was short on staff and too stubborn to hire help. That mistake almost sank me, but I had to fix it myself. No one swooped in with a check or a safety net. My parents' reaction was basically, well, maybe that's a sign you should do something else. I remember one time, I must have been about 25, Jimmy got it into his head that he wanted to start a custom furniture business. He talked my parents into helping him buy tools, rent a small workshop, and even hire a guy to teach him woodworking. First week, he was all over it, posting on social media, talking about orders coming in. Second week, he decided the work was too repetitive and started showing up late or not at all. By the third week, he'd given the keys to his employee and was talking about pivoting to home renovation consulting. That's Jimmy in a nutshell. Jumps in headfirst, then wanders off when it's not fun anymore. And through all of it, my parents cheer him on. They never talk about responsibility or sticking with something. They just move on to the next idea like the last one never happened. Meanwhile, I've been busting my ass to make sure my company runs like a machine. Because in logistics, one mistake can cost thousands and wreck client relationships. My life is deadlines, supply chain schedules, inventory counts, and making sure everyone gets paid. Jimmy's life is daydreaming about being his own boss while skipping the part where you actually work. So when I heard he had the best business idea yet, I already knew my parents would be on board. What I didn't know was how far they'd go this time, or that they'd drag my company into it in a way I couldn't ignore. It started with a phone call from my mom. Totally casual tone, like she was telling me about a new brand of laundry detergent she'd discovered. "We've decided to sell the store," she said. For a second, I just sat there processing it. "Really? You guys retiring?" "Not exactly," she said, sounding weirdly cheerful. "We're selling it to give Jimmy the capital for his new business with his friend Marcus." I had to take the phone away from my ear for a second because my brain just stalled. The store wasn't just their job, it was their entire financial safety net. Without it, they'd have zero income coming in. And now they were telling me they were handing all of that money to Jimmy, a guy whose longest running business venture was 3 months. I asked the obvious question. "Wait, so you're giving all of it to him?" "Of course," Mom said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "It's an investment in his future." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was either that or lose my mind right there on the call. "And I'm guessing none of this is coming my way?" There was a pause. "Why would it?" I stared at the wall for a second. "I don't know. Maybe because it's part of the family business, and you're handing over the entire thing to one kid like the other one doesn't exist?" That's when Dad jumped in. He must have been sitting right there. "You've already got your company. You're doing fine. This is about helping your brother get on his feet." I couldn't believe it. Helping him. He's had more chances than most people get in 3 lifetimes. And every time he burns through the money, you just reload him like a video game character. Meanwhile, I never got a cent from that store, even when I was starting my own company from nothing. Dad's tone went cold. "Don't be greedy, Josh. This isn't about money, it's about family." Ah, yes, the classic move. Question fairness, and suddenly you're greedy. My parents have a way of twisting things so fast you get whiplash. The conversation ended with them making it clear the deal was happening, no matter what I thought. So they sold the store for $120,000. Every dollar went straight into Jimmy and his shady friend Marcus's big idea, which was so vague, I still couldn't tell you what the business actually was supposed to be. Something about integrated logistics consulting for import-export companies, which was hilarious because neither of them had any real-world experience in logistics or imports or exports. I shook my head and told myself to let it go. They'd learn the hard way. Again. Except this time, their mistakes weren't just going to cost them. A few weeks later, I was in the middle of reviewing warehouse reports when my operations manager, Lisa, burst into my office looking like she'd seen a ghost. "You need to get to the front office, now," she said. "Why? What happened?" I said, "It's your dad. He's firing people." I swear my brain short-circuited. "What do you mean firing people? Like, employees?" "Yes," she said wide-eyed. "He walked in, said he's taking over, and started telling people to pack up their desks." I got up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. When I got to the front, sure enough, there was my dad, standing in the reception area like he owned the place, telling one of my dispatchers that their services were no longer required. 2 drivers were standing there holding their keys, looking confused as hell. "What the hell are you doing?" I said, walking straight up to him. He didn't even flinch. "Fixing things. Your company needs new management. Too many inefficiencies. I'm stepping in to get it under control." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. "You're... what?" "I'm jobless now that we've sold the store, and I'm your father. It makes sense. I'll take over the operations, make things run smoother, and you can focus on the bigger picture. You can put me on payroll. A fair salary for the work, of course." I honestly thought I'd misheard him. "You want me to pay you to run my company? The company I built from the ground up while you were telling me it was a waste of time?" He shrugged, like this was a totally reasonable request. "Families help each other. You've got too much on your plate, and I've got experience running a business." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Experience running a corner store is not the same as running a logistics company with multiple warehouses, time-sensitive contracts, and over 100 employees. That's when he pulled the oldest card in his deck. "I'm your father." I took a step closer and kept my voice steady. "Yeah, and I'm your son. The one who doesn't need you barging in and trying to play CEO of a company you know nothing about. You have no authority here, and you're not going to mess with people's jobs because you've decided you're bored and need something to do." He looked offended, like I'd just spit in his face. "Don't talk to me like that. I'm trying to help you." I turned to Lisa. "Nobody's fired. Get everyone back to work." Then I looked at him again. "You need to leave. Now." This is ridiculous, he snapped. You're making a mistake. I can make this company better. No, I said. You'd run it into the ground just like Jimmy's projects. You're not new management. You're not even on the payroll. You're a visitor in this building, and I'm telling you, your visit is over. We stood there for a second, neither of us blinking. Finally, he huffed, muttered something about me regretting this, and walked out. Lisa waited until the door shut before she said, "That was surreal." "Yeah," I said, "and something tells me it's just the beginning." Turns out I was right, and the beginning didn't take long. 2 weeks after my dad tried to stage his little coup at my company, I got a text from my cousin Mark. "Hey man, you hear about Jimmy's thing with Marcus?" I hadn't, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to. But I asked. Mark sent back a voice note instead of typing, which is never a good sign. Apparently, Marcus, the so-called business partner in Jimmy's big plan, had vanished, packed up whatever equipment they had, emptied the business account, and disappeared without a trace. No phone calls, no emails, just gone. They even filed a police report, but the funds were already gone, and Marcus was nowhere to be found. Jimmy was left standing there holding a lease agreement for some rented office space, a couple of unpaid bills, and zero actual money to work with. By the end of that week, the store money was gone. Completely. The business was dead before it even got off the ground. My parents now had no store, no income, and a son who was the victim of a betrayal in their eyes, because apparently Marcus was the only irresponsible one here. I thought, maybe for once, they'd take a step back, own the mistake, and figure out how to get themselves back on their feet without roping me in. But no, that would require self-awareness. Instead, they went in the complete opposite direction. One Monday morning, I get a call from a supplier we've been working with for years. The guy says, "So, I met your senior executive of operations last week. Real interesting guy. Said you're planning a big expansion." I'm silent for a second. "My what?" "Your senior executive of operations. Your dad, right?" I just sat there staring at the phone like it was going to explain itself. My dad had apparently been introducing himself around as my senior executive of operations, a role that doesn't exist and that I sure as hell didn't give him. It got worse. That Friday, one of my sales reps tells me she ran into Jimmy at a networking mixer downtown, and he's there introducing himself as the head of business development for my company, passing out cheap-looking business cards with my company logo on them, his name underneath, and a Gmail address. A Gmail seam. It was like they'd decided, we lost our store, so we're just going to freeload off Josh's company instead. They started showing up to industry events they weren't invited to. I heard from a client that my executives, aka Dad and Jimmy, were very aggressive about pitching some joint venture opportunities that I'd supposedly signed off on. I hadn't. I wanted to rip the whole thing apart on the spot, but I also knew blowing up publicly would just give them ammo to play the family feud card. So I took a breath and decided to play it differently. I started documenting everything. First step, photos. I had a couple of my managers quietly snap pictures whenever they spotted my dad or Jimmy at events, talking to clients, handing out their fake business cards. I also had staff collect any of those cards they could get their hands on. One of them even brought me a whole stack. Jimmy had left on a table at a Chamber of Commerce luncheon. Second step, witnesses. Anytime they made claims about their positions at my company, I asked whoever heard it to email me exactly what was said, word for word if possible. My inbox started filling up fast. Third step, digital footprint. I checked LinkedIn, and sure enough, my dad had updated his profile to say, Senior Executive of Operations at my company, with a start date the exact week after they sold the store. Jimmy's was even better. He listed himself as Head of Business Development and claimed he'd secured multiple high-value contracts in the role. My jaw actually hurt from clenching it. The whole time, I didn't say a word to them. Not a text, not a call, nothing. I wanted them to keep going, keep digging that hole so deep they couldn't crawl out of it when I lowered the boom. It was weird. Part of me was angry, yeah, but another part of me was almost impressed at how far they were willing to push the fantasy. My dad even started wearing suits everywhere, like he was in constant meetings. Jimmy bought himself one of those cheap leather portfolios and carried it around, probably with nothing inside but blank paper. I kept my head down and kept gathering evidence. I knew it was only a matter of time before they crossed a line that even they couldn't talk their way out of, and I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, I was mid-call with a vendor when my phone started buzzing nonstop. First, it was a text from Karen, my account manager. Your dad and Jimmy are in the lobby with the Westmore client, already talking about our expansion plans. That was enough to make me end the call mid-sentence. The Westmore contract is one of our biggest. The kind you don't mess with. Ever. If they were in the building playing executives again, it wasn't just annoying. It was dangerous. I bolted out of my office and headed downstairs. Sure enough, there they were. Dad in one of his serious businessman suits, Jimmy holding that fake leather portfolio like it was a golden ticket. The Westmore rep looked polite but confused, glancing between them and the receptionist like she was trying to figure out who these people were. I stepped right between them and the client. "Hey, good to see you, Linda. Let's get you settled in the conference room," I said to her, keeping my voice calm. Dad cut in before she could move. "We were just explaining to Linda about the strategic partnerships we're developing for the company." I turned and looked him dead in the eye. "You're not developing anything for my company. You're not part of it." I made sure Linda heard that. "Let's head in, Linda," I repeated, motioning toward the hallway. She gave me this small, knowing smile, like she understood what was happening, and followed me out of earshot. Once she was in the conference room with coffee, I turned right back around. "You two, out," I said. Dad's expression flipped from smug to offended. "This is no way to treat senior management. You're not senior management. You're not even employees. You're trespassing," I said. Jimmy tried to smooth it over. "Josh, relax. We were just networking." "Networking with my clients without permission is called interference," I said flatly. "And you've been told to stop, multiple times." I nodded at the receptionist. "Call security, please." That got Dad's attention. "You wouldn't." "I absolutely would," I said. Two of our security staff walked up. They're not exactly huge guys, but they've got the kind of presence that makes people think twice. "Please escort these gentlemen out and let them know they're not to return without my written permission," I told them. Dad started with the "I'm your father" line again, but I didn't even respond. Jimmy muttered something about me being ungrateful as they were led toward the exit. I walked straight back to my office, closed the door, and called Lisa, my operations manager. "Get all department heads in the main conference room in 20 minutes, I told her. "We're putting this to bed." When everyone was seated, I stood at the front of the room and didn't sugarcoat it. "I want to make something very clear. You've all seen my father and brother around here lately. They are not employees. They have no authority. They do not speak for this company in any capacity. If you see them attempting to interact with clients, suppliers, or staff, direct them to me immediately and do not engage." I saw a few relieved faces. Clearly, some people had been wondering how much nonsense they had to put up with. "And if they try to tell you otherwise," I added, "you can let them know that the owner has already told them to stop." After the meeting, I went straight to my office and fired off 2 emails. One to my lawyer and one to my parents and Jimmy. The email to them was short and brutal. Subject: cease and desist effective immediately. You are to stop representing yourselves as employees, officers, or agents of my company. You have no authority to speak to clients, suppliers, or staff on behalf of the company. Any further misrepresentation will result in legal action. Consider this your final warning. I CC'd my lawyer so they'd know I wasn't bluffing. About an hour later, I got the first response. A voicemail from Dad. His voice was tight, like he was holding back shouting. "I cannot believe you would humiliate me like that in front of important people. I am your father. I was only trying to help, and you've made me look like a fool." 5 minutes after that, Jimmy sent a text. "You didn't have to overreact. We're just trying to grow the business." I didn't reply to either of them. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started organizing the evidence I'd been collecting. Photos of them at events, screenshots of their LinkedIn profiles with the fake titles, copies of the business cards, and the witness emails from clients and staff. The Westmore incident had just handed me a golden piece of proof, them actively misrepresenting themselves to one of our largest accounts. The part that really stuck in my head was how calm Linda from Westmore had been when I stepped in. She'd been polite, but her body language screamed that she'd already been uncomfortable. If I hadn't gotten down there in time, who knows what kind of nonsense they would have promised her. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. By the time I closed my laptop, I'd already decided the next move. I'd given them multiple warnings, and they clearly had no intention of stopping. They were using my company's name and reputation like it was a free resource for them to milk. That wasn't family. That was theft. And if they wanted to keep playing the "we're just helping" card, fine. I was about to show them what help from my end looked like, in the form of a legal filing with their names on it. First thing the next morning, I called my lawyer, Dan. We'd worked together before on a supplier dispute a couple years back, and I knew he didn't waste time sugarcoating things. I told him I needed to meet in person and bring documentation. He had me in his office by 10 a.m. When I walked in, I set my laptop on the table and pulled out a folder so thick it barely closed. Everything you asked for? Dan asked, raising an eyebrow. This is everything, I said. Photos, fake business cards, LinkedIn screenshots, client emails, staff statements, and the cherry on top, what happened with Westmore yesterday. He leaned back in his chair and started flipping through the folder. They've been representing themselves as company officers? Without any official position or agreement? Yep. To clients, to suppliers, to random people at networking events, and they've ignored every verbal and written warning to stop. Dan closed the folder. You've got a textbook case here. Misrepresentation, possible fraud, and definitely trespassing. If they're approaching people with fake titles and promising business deals, that's a liability nightmare. Exactly, I said. And if I don't shut this down, it's only a matter of time before they burn a contract I can't replace. All right, he said, sliding the folder toward himself. Here's the plan. We file for an injunction to stop them from using the company name, branding, or claiming any association. At the same time, we sue for damages and legal costs. Given your documentation, we should have no problem getting a judge to act fast. Do it, I said without hesitation. We spent the next hour going over every piece of evidence, making sure the timeline was airtight. Dan had me sign a stack of paperwork, and by the time I left his office, the process had already started. It felt like flipping a switch. This wasn't family drama anymore. It was a business dispute in the legal system. That afternoon, right after the lobby stunt, I called an emergency meeting with HR and security. As of now, I told them, my father and my brother are banned from all company property. No exceptions. If they show up, you call me and security immediately. If they refuse to leave, we call the police. We issued a written no trespass notice to both that same day, so there was no room for we didn't know later. I had HR update our official visitor list, so their names were flagged. Security printed their photos and posted them in the guard station. It felt harsh, but I knew better than to underestimate how far they'd push it if I left even one loophole open. The lawsuit had been filed. Dan sent me a copy of the court stamp as proof. That same night, they got served. I know because my phone blew up. First, a text from Jimmy. Really? You're suing your own family? Over what? Then, a call from Dad that went straight to voicemail. I cannot believe you drag us through court over something that could have been solved with a conversation. You've lost all respect for me. But the real fireworks came the next morning, when my mom showed up at my office without warning. She marched past reception like she owned the place, and came straight into my office, slamming the door behind her. How could you do this to your own family, she said, standing there with her arms crossed like she'd just caught me stealing. I stayed seated. Easy. They've been misrepresenting themselves as executives in my company, interfering with clients, and ignoring every warning to stop. They were just helping, she snapped. No, I said. They were using my company's name to make themselves look important. That's not help. That's putting my reputation, my contracts, and my employees' jobs at risk. Her voice dropped into that guilt trip tone I knew too well. We're family. Your profits are our profits. We've supported you your whole life. I actually laughed at that one. Supported me? When I started this business, you told me it was too risky and not to waste my time. You've supported Jimmy his whole life, not me. And now he's dragging Dad into this mess? And you're all shocked I won't play along? Her face hardened. You've changed. Money has made you cold. No, I said, leaning forward. Money has made me responsible. I have over 100 people counting on me to protect this company. That's my job. Protecting my business comes before protecting your feelings. For a second, she didn't say anything. Then she went for the low blow. Your grandmother would be ashamed of you. I kept my voice level. My grandmother would be ashamed of anyone who pretended to be something they're not and risked other people's livelihoods to feed their ego. That shut her up for a moment. She muttered something about me needing to think about what kind of man I want to be, and stormed out. 2 days later, Dan called. They've lawyered up, he said, but their attorney already reached out about settling. That's a good sign they know they don't have a leg to stand on. Good, I said, but I'm not dropping it unless the settlement includes a formal agreement. They stop using my name, my company's name, and stop showing up at my property. And that's exactly what we'll go for, Dan replied. That weekend, I was at home going over warehouse reports when I got a text from Linda at Westmore, the same client they'd cornered in the lobby. Just wanted to say I appreciate how you handled that situation. It actually made me trust your company more, seeing you take control and protect your clients. I smiled at that one. At least some good had come from the chaos. The people who mattered saw where my priorities were. The court date got set for 3 weeks out. I wasn't nervous. Between the paper trail, the witness statements, and their own LinkedIn profiles, It was going to be open and shut. They thought I was bluffing when I told them to stop. Now they were about to find out that when I say I'm done, I mean it. Court day came faster than I thought it would. 3 weeks of legal silence from their side. No court filings or formal responses, except for a few half-baked settlement offers that basically amounted to, "We'll stop if you pay us." Outside of that, nothing but radio silence. When we walked into the courtroom, they were already sitting there with their lawyer. Some guy who looked like he was hired off Craigslist. Dad wouldn't look at me. Jimmy just kept fidgeting with his phone, like he was waiting for a magic notification to save him. Mom wasn't there, which I figured meant she didn't want to see the outcome in person. It didn't take long. Dan laid out the timeline like a hit list. Dates, photos, copies of the fake business cards, statements from clients, screenshots of their job titles on LinkedIn. The judge flipped through the folder and didn't even hide the fact she was unimpressed with them. Their lawyer tried to argue they were just helping and didn't realize they couldn't use the company name. The judge cut him off. Ignorance of the law is not a defense, especially when you've been given multiple warnings to stop. By the time she was done, it was over. Preliminary injunction granted. They were barred from representing themselves as part of my company in any way, shape, or form. Legal costs and damages were reserved until the case was fully resolved. A week later, their lawyer called Dan. They wanted to settle. We agreed to a consent order that made the injunction permanent and required them to cover my legal fees and a damages fee that made Jimmy's jaw drop. I didn't even have to say anything. I just walked out of the courtroom with Dan, feeling that mix of satisfaction and calm you only get when someone finally runs out of excuses. 2 days later, the fallout started to show. First, word got around to the business community. The local Chamber of Commerce yanked the member listing for their so-called consulting LLC from their website the same week. A couple of suppliers who'd been humoring them finally stopped returning calls. Whatever small network they thought they had, gone. Then came the money problems. Without the store, they had zero steady income. Jimmy's scam of a business had drained the cash from the sale, and Dad's ego meant he wasn't about to take some regular job stocking shelves or driving deliveries. Bills started piling up. I heard about it through my cousin Mark, who runs a small construction crew. He told me they'd called him asking if he had any management-level openings, because they had skills to offer. He told them the truth, that after what they'd pulled, no one around here was going to put them in charge of anything more complicated than a toaster. By the end of the month, they were behind on their mortgage. I knew because Mom posted one of those cryptic "hard times show you who your real family is" messages on Facebook. Translation: we need money, but we want to make it sound like a loyalty test. And sure enough, they showed up at my house the next Saturday. I opened the door to find Dad standing on my porch, with Jimmy 2 steps behind him. Both looked rough. Dad in a wrinkled polo that hadn't seen an iron since the Bush administration. Jimmy looking like he'd been sleeping in his clothes. Dad cleared his throat. "We need to talk." I leaned on the doorframe. "About what? How I can get my LinkedIn title upgraded to Ungrateful Son of the Year?" He ignored that. "We're in a bad spot. The bank's threatening to take the house. We need some help to get through the next couple months." I put on my best thoughtful face. "Oh, I'd love to help, but I'm standing firm on being the greedy guy you said I was. Wouldn't want to ruin my image, you know?" Jimmy jumped in. "Come on, man, it's not like we haven't been there for you." I laughed. "When exactly was that? Was it when you tried to fire my employees? Or when you handed my client a fake business card? Or maybe it was that time you called me greedy for not giving you half the store money?" Dad's jaw tightened. "We're family. You can't just leave us out to dry." "Funny," I said, "because when you were running around town telling everyone you were my boss, I don't remember you worrying about what that would do to me or my employees. So yeah, I can leave you out to dry. And I am." Jimmy muttered something about burning bridges, and I nodded. "Yep, sometimes you gotta burn the bridge just to make sure no one drags their circus back across it." I stepped back and pointed at the driveway. "This conversation's over. I've got things to do, like running the company you didn't get to destroy." Then I shut the door in their faces. Mark called me that night laughing. "You're not gonna believe this," he said. "After you kicked them out, they tried calling Aunt Linda to see if they could crash with her. She told them no, and she told them why. I guess she's had enough of their crap too." Turns out, Mark had been telling the extended family exactly what went down. The fake titles, the court case, everything. So now, it wasn't just me shutting them out. Every cousin, aunt, and uncle knew the truth. Nobody wanted to be their backup plan. Within a week, they were completely isolated. No job offers, no family couch to crash on, no friends returning calls. Just the mortgage company breathing down their necks and the reality that their big plan had finally blown up for good. I wish I could say I felt bad, but the truth? I slept better than I had in months. A couple months later, Mark sent me a picture of my parents' place, with a notice of default taped to the front door. They were already behind before they even came to me for help, so the process moved fast. By the end of the year, the bank had taken the house. When the sheriff's notice came, they still had no plan. No place to go, no one willing to take them in. Movers were out front during the eviction, hauling their furniture onto the curb, while Dad argued with them like that would change anything. Jimmy was pacing the yard, telling anyone who'd listen that the system screwed him. They tried one more time, this long, dramatic email about restoring the family, and how I could redeem myself by helping them start fresh. I replied with a single sentence. I'm just staying true to being greedy, remember? Mark said they'd been trying to crash with other relatives, but no one wanted them. Word about what actually happened had made its way through the family, thanks to Mark, and suddenly every couch was already taken. Jimmy ended up working some part-time job he used to joke was beneath him. Dad took odd jobs where no one cared about his management experience. The mom just kept her head down, pretending not to know anyone when she went out. Me? My company kept growing. My life stayed drama-free, and my only thought was, if this is what greedy looks like, I'll take it.